Good morning, everyone. Welcome to AMS 100 on Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. I am recording this lecture, which will be more of a conversation today than a lecture. So, hope to maybe converse with some of you today. I'm going to invite your comments in a little while. But first, as always, some powerful positive words. And these are from a man named Miller Williams. Have not heard of him until just a few minutes ago. So I don't know anything about him except that he said this: have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What appears bad manners and ill temper or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. Miller Williams. All right. First, I want to take care of a little business, good academic business, and I want to share some information about the next and last major assignment in our class. And before I do that, take this opportunity to thank those of you who took care of your fourth task. Part of that took place in discussion sections last Friday, and part of it was online. So I truly hope that went well for you. All right. So I need to share the screen. We'll go to Canvas. I sent everyone an email yesterday with the guidelines for the Module 5 task, but I want to go over it with you now. So I'm going to do that. Let's share the good old screen there. And, let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Hope everyone can see this. Let me move myself out of the way a little bit there. Okay. I'm going to open up the Module 5 task and we'll go over it here. Okay. Made it available to you in PDF and Microsoft Word forms. Okay. All right. So due date. Originally, that was going to be Monday, May 8th. It is no longer that. You have a bit more time. Wednesday, May 10th, please. Please have it done no later than 11:59 p.m. and upload that to your discussion section Canvas site. This is a writing assignment, and it's a little bit briefer than your first two out-of-class writing assignments. It does require MLA formatting, along with the other presentation guidelines that apply to your first two papers, so please refer to those when putting this together. So we are asking you for a 3-paragraph response to one of two choices. Here's the first choice. So this centers on the documentaries that we made available for this module. There were 3 of those, including the one for today, Bayard Rustin's Brother Outsider. The other 2 are Crip Camp, Soldados. Okay, so you have those 3 to choose from. We want you to, if you choose this choice, Pick the documentary that means the most to you. Answer these questions. Do one paragraph for each question. Each paragraph needs to have specific example from the documentary that you cover. So there are 3 questions here. First one is, in your opinion, what's the most important lesson that you learned from this documentary about social movements and freedom struggles in the United States? And throughout this semester, I have mentioned the importance of social movements and freedom struggles, and George Lipsitz talked about those in his article, What is American Studies? So that's the first question. Second question you need to answer with a paragraph. What's a significant connection between the documentary you chose and one of the previous AMS 100 modules? All right? So be thinking about material that was covered in one of those earlier modules. Find a connection between that module's theme and this documentary. Excuse me. All right, and the third question for a paragraph. I want you to consider current events or an event in the United States and connect something in that documentary to a current event or events. So looking at relevance between the documentary and what's going on today in the United States. So that's one choice for the documentary. The other choice centers on the article by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., on Vietnam, beyond Vietnam. We talked about that some last week, and this gives you an opportunity to write about the revolution of values, which spent some time talking about that in the lecture. Very important. So, again, 3 paragraphs, one for each of these points. Okay, so point A, ask yourself, do you find King's goals for the revolution of values to be goals worth pursuing? Why or why not? Tell us about that. Second point, do you find King's rhetorical strategies to be effective in making the case for the revolution of values? Why or why not? So when we say rhetorical strategies, simply the way the man used words, all right? Very vivid speech, made emotional appeals, made logical appeals. Also, the speaker appealed to you to recognize the goodwill in his character. All right? So those are some things you could think of, comment on. And the last point that you would write a paragraph about, if you made this topic choice, do you believe that the United States, along with the Western world, has made progress toward making King's revolution of values a reality? Why or why not? All right? And for each of those paragraphs, you would need to provide concrete, specific example from the text and use that to justify your answer. All right. So that's what we're asking you to write up for next Wednesday. We do hope that in the hustle and bustle of next week and sure, there's a little stress, maybe more than a little stress for finals week, that our final, such as it is, a little less stressful than maybe some of your others. But We're all about minimizing that stress. Okay? All right, so if you have questions about this, please hang on with those a little bit, because in a little while I'm going to open up the Zoom to questions and take a few questions and comments. Okay. I'm going to stop that share for a second. Okay. And I want to say a little bit about May Day, yesterday, International Workers' Day, a day in which the struggles of laborers, the working class around the world, are highlighted, that it's a good idea to be mindful of the strength and the solidarity of working people around the world. So this has been a holiday, a commemorative date that means so much to so many people over the decades. And we haven't spent a lot of time in this class on the history of the labor movement in the United States. And one reason for that is because it is not one of my specialties as a teacher and a scholar. It's not that I don't care about it. I care about it deeply. It's just that I had some other priorities, but I do know quite a bit about the labor movement in the United States, and I know some people who specialize in labor history right here in the American Studies Department at KU, and these are very valued colleagues. They've helped me quite a bit, and I'm grateful to them. It's important to remember, among other things, that violence in the United States, much of it has centered on race and racism, and we've explored some of that. It's a tough history, disturbing history, to say the least. Another area in which there have been many violent incidents has been in labor history in the United States. So, for example, reactions to strikes, strikes by workers throughout our history have resulted in violence. And this is very tragic. At one point, organizing a labor union was basically illegal in this country. And very often, the government, various local, state, federal governments have joined forces with business and management to crush labor strikes. One of these that I want to tell you about is known as the Ludlow Massacre. Took place in Colorado in 1914. Let me share the screen a little bit again and say a few things about the Ludlow Massacre. All right, so let me adjust a few things here. There we go. Let's get, all right. So this site that I'm showing you now is Colorado Encyclopedia, okay? And you have this article on the Ludlow Massacre, and I'll read a little bit of it here and some images. And it states that the Ludlow Massacre began on the morning of April 20, 1914, when a battle broke out between the Colorado National Guard and striking coal miners at their tent colony outside of Ludlow in Las Animas County. Nobody knows who fired the first shot, but the incident is remembered as a massacre because the miners and their families bore the brunt of the casualties. At least 19 people died, including one guardsman, 5 miners, and 13 women and children who suffocated as they hid from the gunfire in a pit. More died in violence throughout southern Colorado over the next few days. No matter how the casualties are counted, the Ludlow Massacre is one of the bloodiest events in American labor history. The massacre was the culminating event of the 1913-14 Colorado coal miners' strike. And that strike had 2 main goals. The first was getting the coal operators to follow the state of Colorado mining law and gaining representation by the United Mine Workers of America for Colorado's coal miners. And this dispute was bloody from the outset, with deaths on both sides. I will post this to module 5 so you can read it on your own. Okay, I'll stop sharing the screen. And what I want to share with you now, I want to read to you some lyrics from a song called Ludlow Massacre. It's and this is a song by Woody Guthrie. Some of you may have heard of Woody Guthrie, one of the most important artists, musicians, freedom fighters, American heroes of the 20th century. Woody Guthrie was from Oklahoma, and he became known around the country and around the world as a champion of the common people and an unrelenting foe of fascism and exploitation of working people. So these are his lyrics for a song he did called Ludlow Massacre. And I will read these to you. I'll also put up a YouTube video of Woody Guthrie performing this great song. Ludlow Massacre by Woody Guthrie. And this is done in the voice of one of the striking miners. Okay, so Guthrie took on the persona of one of the striking coal miners. It was early springtime when the strike was on. They drove us miners out of doors. Out from the houses that the company owned, we moved into tents up at Old Ludlow. I was worried bad about my children, soldiers guarding the railroad bridge. Every once in a while, a bullet would fly, kick up gravel under my feet. We were so afraid you would kill our children. We dug us a cave that was 7 foot deep, carried our young ones and pregnant women down inside the cave to sleep. That very night, your soldiers waited until all us miners were asleep. You snuck around our little tent town, soaked our tents with kerosene. You struck a match, and in the blaze that started, you pulled the triggers of your Gatling guns. I made a run for the children, but the firewall stopped me. 13 children died from your guns. I carried my blanket to a wire fence corner, watched the fire till the blaze died down, I helped some people drag their belongings while your bullets killed us all around. I will never forget the look on the faces of the men and women that awful day when we stood around to preach their funerals and lay the corpses of the dead away. We told the Colorado governor to call the president, tell him to call off his National Guard. But the National Guard belonged to the governor, so he didn't try so very hard. Our women from Trinidad, they hauled some potatoes up to Walsenburg in a little cart. They sold their potatoes and brought some guns back, and they put a gun in every hand. The state soldiers jumped us in the wire fence corners. They did not know we had these guns, and the redneck miners mowed down these troopers. You should have seen those poor boys run. We took some cement and walled that cave up where you killed these 13 children inside. I said, God bless the Mine Workers Union. And then I hung my head and cried. Woody Guthrie song, Ludlow Massacre. I want you to look into this incident on your own. There's a lot of material out there on it. Think about how much you've learned about labor history in the United States. Maybe you've learned about incidents such as the Ludlow Massacre. These kind of incidents are taught about in some school districts, not in others. Hang on just a second. My computer is about ready to run out of power. I got to go run and get my adapter. Be right back. I'm very sorry. I didn't expect that to happen. Be right back. Hang on. Okay, sorry about that. We're back in business. Getting charged up. Okay. All right. So let me move on to the video we asked you to watch for today. Brother Outsider, The Life of Bayard Rustin. It's hard for me to know where to start with this one. So I'll start with, so I'll go back to when I first began showing this documentary in classes here at KU. That was back in 2006. And I've had various opportunities to share it with students since then. And I have very rarely encountered any students over those years. And I've shown it to big classes like yours. I've shown it to small classes. Most people really like the documentary. Haven't had too many negative takes on it. But, you know, not saying there won't be some in this class, but it's hard for me to imagine that anyone would not have an opinion on this documentary. And one thing that the documentary is particularly effective at doing is to expand and complicate our knowledge of the African American freedom struggle in the United States. We all know about it. We all know about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who is featured in the documentary, and various other historical figures, but there is so much in that documentary revolving around Bayard Rustin and his lifetime of activism that it is a crash course in the complexity of and the controversy and the achievements and the importance of the African American freedom struggle. And in addition to that, it is not just about the African American freedom struggle. It is about the labor movement in this country. I'm sure you remember that part of the documentary focuses on a man named A. Philip Randolph and the work that he did with Bayard Rustin. A. Philip Randolph was a labor union leader, a Black labor union leader, and one of the most important figures of the 20th century also, like Bayard Rustin was. But safe to say, not as well known as people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, who appears in the video, right? There's part of a debate between Rustin and Malcolm X. Those two men, very different approaches to challenging racism in the United States, right? You also had a debate between Bayard Rustin and a man named Stokely Carmichael, who advocated Black Power and took a more confrontational, perhaps militant approach to the severe problem of racism in the United States. So yeah, we learn about the labor movement. We learn about disputes within the African American freedom struggle. We learn about the pacifist movement in the United States, right? Rustin was a member, started off as a member of an organization called the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And Rustin was a Quaker. So, of course, the Quaker Christian denomination, its members oppose war and have been known to apply for conscientious objector status during wars, sometimes serve in the military, but request to be excused from combat duties because of their pacifism. All right, and of course, we know from the documentary that Rustin went pretty far during World War II and encouraged people to refuse being drafted and went to prison for that. And he was willing to go to prison for that. He was willing on more than one occasion to be put in jail for his beliefs. So although some people, quite a few people, let's be honest, quite a few people, unfortunately, in my view, saw Rustin as an anti-American person, his willingness to take an unpopular stand and to go to prison for it and to suffer beatings for it those things are pretty American too. Not exclusively American, but we could read them as very American. So there's that. But you could ask yourselves, how many people are willing to walk the walk like Rustin did? How many people would be willing to put their bodies on the line to fight racism, to stand up for pacifism? Probably not a lot. Now, later on, Rustin did state some regrets about opposing World War II. Okay? It was important, he admitted, for that war to be waged against fascism from Nazi Germany and from Imperial Japan. So, yes, later on in his life, some of his views modified. And he generated some controversy when he spoke in favor of the Johnson administration's Vietnam War. Okay? So I've mentioned this about some other people in this class that we've studied. No way did Rustin walk on water. He's not immune to criticism. But I think it's safe to say that he was an extraordinary figure. You know, he was certainly out of the ordinary. And this leads us to the question of his sexuality. Okay? And back then, you know, Rustin, born in 1912, and a man who was absolutely unashamed of being black, absolutely unashamed of being gay. Now, it's risky to take that position. It's risky to take that position in 2023, but it's safe to say that it's a little less risky in a lot of instances than it was back when Rustin was doing what he did. This was a brave man. Whether or not one agreed with his views and his, for example, his one-time membership in the Communist Party, that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, right? And it was. There's that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, as I see it, and you don't have to agree with this, that no matter whether all Americans liked him or not, and they sure didn't, not all Americans did, my belief on Rustin is that he fought to make life better for everyone in this country, and that everyone on some level did benefit from at least some of the actions that Bayard Rustin did, and that many of us benefited immensely and continue to benefit from what he did. But it's not, of course, just about Rustin as an individual. Rustin took the emphasis, tried to get people not to look at him so much as an individual, but to look at the movements that he represented. Okay? And there's a part in the documentary where the March on Washington, 1963, with King's I Have a Dream speech, where people were going after Rustin, who organized that event, and bringing up the fact that he had been a member of the Communist Party, that he had been arrested and jailed for so-called sexual perversion. And Rustin's response to that was, "It's not about me. These people are not saying this because of who I am. They're doing this to destroy the movement. That's what it's about. And they're not going to destroy the movement. They will fail. And he was right. The March on Washington went on, and King gave his speech. So there's that. So those are some of my thoughts on Bayard Rustin, the subject of that documentary, Brother Outsider, The Life of Bayard Rustin. So what I want to do now is to shut up and give you the opportunity. And it's nice if you can, it's up to you whether you want to open up your cameras or not. But I invite your comments now. And or questions. Let's see if anything's in the chat there. Nothing in the chat yet. Okay. Well, things look okay. Let me see this. Okay. Excellent question. Thank you, Spencer. Is there a class about labor movements? I am sure that here at KU, yes, that there are classes in the history department, in American studies. Some of these classes would be cross-referenced, where you would get a good focus on the labor movement, labor history. Okay, so I don't have that in front of me right now, but I would be more than happy to have a look through the course catalogs, have a look through some of the faculty lists. But what you might want to do is you can go to the American Studies website. You can go to the history department website, have a look at the faculty and their interests, and there will definitely be people there who specialize in labor history. You can find out what kind of classes they teach. But I know that David Roediger, for example, whose article you read, he specializes in labor history as well, as does Professor Elizabeth Esch, who works in the history department and in American studies. Okay. From Waverly, thank you. Did the LGBT community rally around Rustin, especially during, after his arrest? The film didn't mention much about the LGBT movement of the time, so I was wondering how it played into Rustin's life. Another great question. Thank you for that, Waverly. I would have to look into that, the first part of your comment. I would assume that yes, there was some of this, but that it didn't look and sound very much like what we would tend to see nowadays in 2023. That came later, but this is not to say that there has been an LGBT community or communities since there have been human beings on the planet Earth. But it has taken different shapes and different forms over the decades and the centuries. So at that time in the early 50s, when Rustin was put in jail for that incident in Pasadena, California, I'm sure he got support, but it was much more, let's say, underground, much less open than we would expect for now. But yeah, you're right. It took Rustin a while also to gravitate toward the emerging LGBT movement as well. So there's some great biographies of Rustin. People over at the Multicultural Resource Center there at KU, I think, would be able to help a lot with this. And the people in the WGSS department here at KU. I would be, I think it's very likely that some classes over there would focus on Rustin. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Waverly. Javier. Okay. Great question. In the Beyond Vietnam speech, King mentions the poverty program. What impact did the war on poverty have on the Vietnam War? I love that question. Well, I'll go to King with that. And in his view, it didn't have enough of an impact on the Vietnam War because President Johnson seemed like he was kind of trying to have things both ways. In King's view, that the war in Vietnam was taking resources away from the war on poverty, and the domestic agenda that Johnson was pursuing was rather incompatible with the agenda that was taking place outside the country in countries like Vietnam. And that wasn't the only country where this Cold War effort was being carried out, right? The Dominican Republic, for example, that was there was military action in the Dominican Republic under the Johnson administration. You might want to look into that. This upset a lot of people like King, but the war on poverty was an umbrella term for a set of huge government initiatives to carry out some of the economic justice agenda that frankly didn't get finished with efforts like Reconstruction. So I think if you ask King, he would certainly say that the war on poverty should have been incorporated into the revolution of values and should have been an international effort. But your great question, it would probably take me a lot more time and a lot more wisdom to answer your question, but it is an excellent one. I would encourage you to look into it and find some quality books about Rustin, some quality books about King or Johnson, and that'll help you a lot more than I can right now. Do you lead any similar classes to this one here at KU? Well, Kyler, thank you so much for that one. I'm that's very kind of you. I do, and I've taught classes on veterans with disabilities, and I hope to teach those classes again. I've taught classes focusing specifically on disability in American culture, and I hope to be teaching those classes again as well. So, and I can do independent reading classes with individual students. So I'm happy to do that too. So, let's talk about that. And Okay. Here are some questions from Atik on the next essay. And yeah, this is a good, thank you for this question, Atik. Yeah, basically, should it be like the previous out of class writing assignments with 5 paragraphs, or just the 3 paragraphs where you directly answer the questions? It is the second one. Just use your paragraphs to answer those questions in the most focused and specific and nuanced way that you can. All right? So don't need to follow that 5 paragraph form that you used for the first 2 essays. Okay? All right. Okay. We're almost out of time here. Better sign off and let you go to your next important classes. So thank you so much for your interaction today and for joining us. Please reach out to me and or your discussion teachers if you have anything else. And say goodbye for now, and we'll meet again for our last session on Thursday. Until then, be safe, be well, and take good care of yourselves and one another. Bye-bye.